recorded.
Hello, my name is Johnny, and my commander is Kaalia of the Vast. It's a pretty self-explanatory build. I'd like to go over the mana base right now. I run 3 planes.
You need a manicure, dude.
2 swamps. And 2 mountains for my basics. Now for the non-basics, I run a Badlands. I also run a Plateau. And I run a Scrubland. Now for the fetches, I actually run about 4 of them. I run, these are not all the fetches, but I run Arid Mesa. I run Battlefield Forge. I also run Blood Crypt, Bloodstained Mire. I run Cavern of Souls, which when it enters the battlefield, you have to name a creature type. Adds 1 generic to your mana pool, and you can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. And with Kaalia, you can say angels, dragons, or demons, and you can use that to cast them. I also run a Clifftop Retreat. Now, Command Beacon is a really excellent land to run in this deck because everybody, when you run Kaalia, you're basically putting a target on your chest. Let's say Kaalia's been killed twice in the game. You tap the Command Beacon, sacrifice it, Kaalia goes to your hand. So there's no commander attacks on it. Then I run a Command Tower. I also run a Dragon Skull Summit. I run a Fetid Heath. A Godless Shrine. I also run a Graven Cairns. A Hollow Bandit Lord. If you get Kaalia out and this card's in play, you can pay 3 life to give Kaalia haste rather than having lightning greaves. Homeward Path. Isolated Chapel. Marsh Flats. It's also a fetch land. Phyrexian Tower. Polluted Delta. That's a fetch land. Here's a different type of fetch land. Prismatic Vista. It only allows you to search for basic lands. It's good early game, it's horrible late game. Reflecting Pool. Rugged Prairie. Sacred Foundry. It's a shock land. Savai Triome. This looks like it's saying something bad. Shizu, Death's Storehouse. It could have almost sounded like Shih Tzu.
Bark, bark, bark.
Silent Clearing. Slayer's Stronghold. Sunhome Fortress, Tainted Field, Vault of the Archangel is kind of an important land in this deck. If you tap a certain amount of mana, it allows your creatures to have Death Touch and Lifelink until the end of turn. Volrath's Stronghold. And that is it for the lands. Now we're going into the artifacts. I run a Boros Signet, Chromatic Lantern. I run a Chrome Mox. It's a 0 casting cost mana rock, but the only catch with this is you have to imprint something other than a land or an artifact to add the colors that you wish. I also run a Coalition Relic, Crucible of the Worlds. In case someone decides to play Armageddon, you can play your lands for the graveyard. Felwar Stone, Lightning Greaves, Lotus Petal. This is another 0-drop artifact. You can sacrifice it to add any color to your mana pool. Mana Crypt is similar to a Soul Ring, except for during your upkeep you have to roll a dice. Odds you take 3 damage, evens you take no damage, and it produces 2. Mana Vault, Mox Opal. Now the trick with this one is, for you to add any color mana, you have to have Metalcraft. And Metalcraft is having 3 or more artifacts on the field at once.
I need to step up my game. He's not this so good.
Orzhov Signet, Rakdos Signet, you have your Soul Ring. I have a Sensei's Divining Top. It is in Japanese. I have a Talisman of Indulgence. And I am also running a Whisper Silk Cloak to make my creature unblockable. And the last card for the artifacts, one of everybody's favorite artifacts, Winter's Orb. Now into my sorceries. Like I was stating, Armageddon, Buried Alive. It lets you search for up to 3 creature cards and put them into your graveyard. You might be asking yourself why. I have an answer for that in a minute. Damnation. It's a black Wrath of God. It's a board wipe. Demonic Tutor. Diabolic Intent. The only downfall with this card is that you have to sacrifice a creature. To cast this spell, you have to sacrifice a creature, search your library for a card, and put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. So there's a plus and a minus for both of them. Diabolic Tutor. Increasing Ambition. With this card you pay a little bit more, but it also has flashback, so you can tutor twice. Living Death. Each player exiles all creature cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures he or she controls, then put all creatures... It's basically you're swapping for what's on the battlefield and bringing your graveyard into play. And here's the reason that you would want to use the other card I was talking about, where you put 3 cards. You may put 3 cards into your graveyard. This is reanimate. You play the reanimate for the 1, and whatever the cost, the mana cost is of that creature you reanimate, you take that much damage. But in Commander, you start with 40, so life really doesn't matter. And Vindicate destroys target permanent.
Look what I did.
And here's the other board wipe. It is Wrath of God.
Oh my god.
This card actually, besides the Winter Orb, this slows down a lot of players as well. It's Blood Moon. It turns all non-basic lands into mountains. So that also affects you, but if you have mana rocks, you can still use that for mana of any color. Chaos Warp, the only downside to this is if you try to Chaos Warp their commander, the rules have changed that you can no longer tuck the commander, which you can't put them at the bottom of the library or make them shuffle it back in. And here we have Entomb. Search your library for a card and put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. That's another card that would be useful for reanimate. Path to Exile, self-explanatory. Here we are going into enchantments, I think. This is a sneak attack. I don't know why that seems to be out of order, but it is. Swords to Plowshare. It's another exile spell. Terminate. And my last spell here is Vampiric Tutor. You pay 2 life. You search for any card you want, and then you proceed to shuffle your library and put that chosen card on top. You draw into it your next turn. And now for my creatures. I've got Aegis Angel. I've got Angel of Serenity. I've got Avacyn Angel of Hope, which makes everything indestructible on your board. Which is where the board wipes in the Armageddon come in handy, because if you do a board wipe with this into play, nothing is destroyed but your opponent's stuff. Karmic Guide. When Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, you may return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Your opponent's activated abilities, your opponent's control cannot be activated. Rare Dawnbreaker. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return a target creature card from your graveyard to play. It's another May ability. Sephara Sky's Blade. You may pay 1 and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying, rather than paying the spell's mana cost. It's got flying and lifelink. Other creatures you control with flying have indestructibility. Next one is Arc Fiend of Depravity. It's flying. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. This goes really good with token decks. It's against it. Here's another one of my favorite cards. Lord of the Void, flying. Whenever Lord of the Void deals damage to a player, that player exiles the top 7 cards of their library, then put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield under your control. So they exile 7 if they have a creature. I get it under my control. Here's another great card. Runescar Demon. When it enters the battlefield, you go and get a tutor for a card. This is a fun card, especially multiplayer. Sour of Discord, flying. As Sour of Discord enters the battlefield, you choose 2 players. When damage is dealt to one of the chosen players, that other chosen player also loses that much life. This is the only infect creature I have in here. Skitherix, the Blight Dragon. He's a 4/4 infect. For 1 black, you can give it haste. For 2 black, you can regenerate him. I'll move it into the reds. Bale Fire Dragon. Whenever Bale Flyer Dragon deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature the player controls. Borgon Hellkite. You've got Flash, which means you can flash it into play at any point in time. It's someone else's turn. Flying. When the Hellkite enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage divided as you choose any number of target creatures and or players. Dragon Mage. Great card. It is a 5/5 dragon with flying. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. So with Kaalia out, you cheat this into play. It's basically a Wheel of Fortune. And you get a 7. You get a brand new hand. Hellkite Tyrant. Whenever this deals damage, you get to basically take all your opponents that you're attacking, their artifacts. Scourge of the Throne. A 5/5 flying dragon. When Scourge of the Throne attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, untap all with the most life. You untap it and you get a, after this phase, there is an additional combat. Angel of Despair. When it comes in, you get to blow up a target permanent. Alright, Aurelia the War Leader. It's flying, vigilance, and haste. Whenever Aurelia the War Leader attacks, for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat. So I have 2 creatures that give an additional combat phase. Gazella, Blade of Gold Knight. Flying, first strike. If a source would be deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, that source deals double that damage to a player or permanent. If a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, half that damage rounded up. And here's one of the win cons. Master of Cruelties. You bring it in with Kaalia. It states Master of Cruelty has to attack alone. Kaalia is basically a way of cheating this ability. Kaalia declares attack. She's the only one that attacks. Master of Cruelties does his damage, and then Kaalia finishes you off for the extra 2 when you're dead. And here's another win con, is Platinum Angel. Your opponents cannot win the game, and you cannot lose the game. And that is it for my Kaalia the Vast Commander deck. Thank you.
That was so much more professional.